Hey, what's going on, guys? It's CalebX01. Thank you for joining me again for another one of my random horror reviews. For today's episode, I definitely feel like it's going to be a quicker slash shorter review for you guys today, and I'll actually get into the reasoning why as we start talking about today's movie. So getting into that now, today's flick is an Australian true crime horror film titled Snowtown. Now, this is a movie that I don't hear a lot of people talk about. Even people who are fans of these true crime serial killer movies, I still feel like it flies under a lot of people's radar. So obviously going to be talking about this one today. And without any more delay, let's just get into the story with this one. So, as I said, this is a true crime film based on actual murders. These murders were known as the Snowtown murders. Some people might know them better as the bodies in barrel murders. They took place all the way through the 90s here in Australia. They were committed by a man named John Bunting. He was assisted by a handful of people, but that's sort of the gist of the murders. I feel like globally, maybe these murders aren't too well known, but they're pretty notorious here in Australia. But getting into the film here, we follow our lead, who is a teenager named Jamie, and to say the least, his life and his family's life is really tough. There's a handful of things that just make life really difficult for them. And I don't really want to get too much into it, but to say the least, as I said, his life is hard, his family's life is hard, he's struggling, and a man comes into his life named John Bunting, and the two form a relationship of sorts, and I'm going to sort of leave it there because, as I said, this is a true crime film. There's no ways of really changing the story and depicting it because it's telling you exactly what happened, so I don't want to get in too much detail here, but let's start talking about today's movie, Snowtown. So this was pretty much a first time watch for me, and I say pretty much because technically I had seen this movie once before. However, I was much younger, so pretty much all of the subject matter would have been completely going over my head in the first place. However, when I rewatched it again last night, I got to about the 10-minute mark, and everything from then I had completely forgotten, so I was pretty much watching this one as a fresh slate all again. But as I said in my intro, I feel like today's review is going to be a quicker slash shorter one, and that's purely because I got about to the halfway mark in this movie, and I just said to myself, I don't know how I'm going to review this one. And that's purely because, as I said, this is a true crime film. We're actually following a real life story, and I find it a lot harder to talk about these sort of movies because a big part about talking about movies like I do here on my channel is, criticizing the plot and the direction of the story. Here we're following real life people, obviously depicted by actors, but real life people, real life events, things that actually happen. So whenever I watch a movie that is true crime or following real life serial killers, I feel myself more so learning other than being entertained. So it could just be me, but I find it a lot harder to talk about movies like this. But with all that aside, I'm going to do my best. Where I want to start in this one is this movie probably isn't for the faint of heart. I find this movie to be really disturbing. And when you hear people put together lists of like most disturbing films of all time, I almost guarantee a lot of people won't include this one. However, to me, I would find this more disturbing than a film like Martyrs or like Hostel. And there's a lot of things that play into that. First of all, very realistic, very gritty. It doesn't tiptoe around things going on in this movie. It really shows you the struggles, as I said, going on in our lead Jamie's life. It shows you the type of person that John Bunting was. It doesn't hold back on gore. Just everything in this movie. It really shows you and tells you and puts you in the situation of what's going on. Another thing that could make it very realistic for me is, as I said, this is an Australian film. I live in Australia, so everything in this movie just feels very real to me. I didn't grow up, in the type of, situation that these characters were, luckily. But, however, you see that, I've been through towns that, are very much like, or look like places in this film. The dialogue and the way that people talk to each other. There are very much characters like that here in Australia. So, again, that could have added to the realness to it. I just feel like this movie is very disturbing and not to be slept on. Don't go into this thinking that it's going to be a light watch, because it is really heavy. There's a lot of heavy subject matter, and yeah, it's not for the weak. Now, as I said before, the Snowtown murders, or the Bodies in Barrel murders, whatever you want to call them, I feel like they're not too globally known. However, here in Australia, they are pretty infamous. However, I am not a scholar on the subject. I don't know the cases too well. I don't know the situation, I'd probably say, any better than the average Australian. However, from what I've heard, this movie is pretty accurate to what was going on. So maybe if you feel like familiarizing yourself with the Snowtown murders, but you don't feel like reading up on it or watching a documentary, you'd much prefer to watch it in like a film style format, this could be the way to go. And as I said, this movie is disturbing. It definitely is brutal. But for those who are thinking, it's going to have gore for the sake of having gore and blood flying everywhere, and it's going to be edgy as seat, heart racing, to be completely honest, this movie is pretty slow, but it's kind of what you expect with these true crime films. And if anything, I'd probably say this movie is, besides true crime, drama/thriller over horror. Obviously, I have it in my horror collection, and I'm featuring it on my random horror reviews. It's not out of place, because a lot of the stuff in this movie is horrific. However, I just want to let you know, it's not going to be this slasher where there's blood flying around and people are letting out these blood-curdling screams, and, there's people's wearing masks. It's very realistic, it's very slow. I just want to make people aware of that also. So I am going to sort of try and just wrap up this review here. As I said, I find it kind of hard to just talk about these true crime, real-life murder sort of films, because, as I said, when I'm watching something like this, I feel like I'm more so learning other than being entertained. And when I say that, I'm still engaged, I'm still focused in on what's going on, but, as I said, I'm learning about a real-life story. I'm learning about real people and a real situation that happened. So, as I said, it could just be me, but I just find it hard to review and talk about things. As I said, it's hard to get into the plot and story because, I'm not going to say, oh, it's written poorly and you should have added this, because it's telling a real life situation. So, it's hard to talk about it on that sort of front. The acting and everything in this movie is really solid, pretty outstanding. All the technical stuff, the camera work and all that, the shots, it's amazing like that. But, this movie definitely isn't a comfort movie. It's not going to be a movie that I come back to too often. However, it is a good movie. It's well done, as disturbing as I find it, and as realistic and brutal and gritty as it is. I feel like this is a good movie, and to say that it's bad just because of how brutal it is or anything like that is stupid. As I said, I'm not going to come back to it too often, but with all this being said, I'm just going to sort of give it a rating. I am going to give Snowtown, I think it at least deserves a 7.5. As I said, the rewatchability isn't quite there, just purely because I don't feel like sitting through a depressing, 115 minutes. I really don't feel like doing that. However, I learnt a lot. I was engaged. And I feel like, as I said, if you're a fan of like real life murder, true crime films, this is definitely one to watch out for. So thank you for joining me today, guys, for my review of Snowtown. As I said, I knew it was going to be a shorter, quicker review for you guys today. I just find these movies difficult to talk about. Let me know if I'm the only one. It's just hard to critique something that is a real life story, and as I said, I feel like I'm more so learning other than, it's hard to break down a plot and everything of something that's real. As I said, the acting and everything on a technical front is there. So I'm just going to leave it there. As I said, I think I gave it a 7.5, or I've already sort of forgotten my rating. It is a good movie, but not one I'm going to revisit too often. But as I said, thank you for joining me again, guys. I really appreciate everyone who's coming back to my channel. I really appreciate the subscribers, the likes, the comments, all that. I'm extremely grateful for. So thank you for joining me again, guys, and I'll see you for some more content soon. Peace.